This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Disabled Persons Assembly's Notable Radio Show. DPA is a systemic advocacy organisation run by and for disabled people. DPA is a pan-impaired organisation with members across the country. Over the next half hour, we'll discover how we can work collaboratively to achieve inclusion for all New Zealanders. DPA's Notable Radio Show, a whole new attitude.
Kia ora and welcome to DPA's Notable Radio. I'm your host, Amy Taylor. Today we are talking about DPA's and Kia Hauramu's self-defence course for disabled women, which will be held this Saturday and Sunday at the Blind Low Vision Hall in South Dunedin. Disabled women face higher rates of violence and yet are often excluded from traditional self-defence spaces. So we're going to be looking at what a truly inclusive approach looks like. Joining me today is Belle Murphy. Hello, Belle.
Hello.
She's from Kia Hauramu and she's going to be delivering our self-defence course, which is designed specifically for disabled women and gender diverse people. Kia ora and welcome. So can you start by telling us about Kia Hauramu and your role?
Yeah, so Kia Hauramu is...
Thank you for the pronunciation correction.
No worries, there's nothing like hearing it. So Kia Hauramu Personal Safety Education is our national network of accredited facilitators of empowerment self-defense, which is a unique tradition, a new unique form of self-defense education that is grounded in the lived realities and evidence-based knowledge about the way that violence plays out in society and in the lives, particularly of women and other marginalized groups within society. So we've been doing this mahi for, it'll be 40 years coming up soon.
Wow, that's a long time. It's about the same age as DPA. We're on 41 years this year.
Oh, awesome. Sister organizations. Yeah, so we used to be called the Women's Self-Defense Network, Wahine Toa, for many years. But in 2021, we changed our name to Kia Hauramu, signaling, a renewed and deeper commitment to working from a Te Tiriti base and also our aspirations for working with a broader range of genders as well. So we have programs, we have various curriculums for different age groups. We have taught hundreds of thousands of girls across Aotearoa in schools, primary, intermediate, and high schools. And then in the community, we prioritize partnering with organizations like the Disabled Persons Assembly and others to provide tailored programs that reach those who are, for one reason or another, at increased risk of experiencing interpersonal violence.
So we have said previously that disabled people are more at risk of interpersonal violence. What gaps were you seeing that led you to approach, first of all, our member, Sue, and then me, to create something specific for disabled women?
Well, first of all, yes, we know that disabled people experience much higher rates of sexual violence and relationship violence and other forms of interpersonal abuse, and that is a priority for us to reach people in those groups. That also, like all the classes I teach. So when I advertise a generic women's course, I always state that all abilities and all, including gender minorities who feel comfortable in a woman-centered space are welcome to come. But the truth is,
wonderful that being so inclusive is just fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes the people always come with a range of abilities because that's what it is to be human, right? Mm-hmm. And at different times in our lives, we can all experience different levels of disability. But I think it is important to have explicit spaces, especially for groups who, it can take courage to come to a self-defense for anyone, right? Mm. It means you're putting yourself out there to learn something that's a bit different, how to use our minds, bodies, and voices in ways that we might not be accustomed to, and it can feel vulnerable. And so I think it's important to have tailored specific courses for groups so that they can really know that this is going to be a welcoming space, because just saying everyone's welcome doesn't necessarily assuage some very well-founded questions that people might have about whether or not their needs will be accommodated and things like that. So
absolutely, it's walk the walk rather than talk the talk stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually like making sure that people do feel included as well as being told that they are. So this is a similar question. Disabled women experience higher rates of violence. How does that shape the way that you teach self-defense?
Well, I think, just going back a little bit to the dawn of empowerment self-defense as an approach to self-defense education, in general, it was realized that martial arts, which, are fabulous for fitness, for strength, for confidence, and for defending yourself in certain situations, but they tend to be grounded in a professional competitive sports type context, and other forms of self-defense instruction that have been around for a long time, say police-based courses, or they tend to focus on stranger danger and on and based on a kind of a masculinist approach, if you will, to violence. So they were missing the kinds of complex social, psychological, and emotional dynamics that are often present within the kind of violence that women experience, which usually happens behind closed doors and in personal relationships, where our choices for how we respond to inappropriate behavior can be all tangled up with our personal goals, with those relationships, with power dynamics and our needs. And then when you consider folks who are disabled, who may have more layers of complexity around their dependence on others in their life and more marginalization or isolation, we know that any form of isolation increases our risk of being targeted by perpetrators who may be around in our environment. And so the courses that the way we teach them, it's not just the punches and the kicks and the fancy moves, which are really fun and really important to learn. We also learn about ways that we can assert our boundaries using words, using our whole selves, right? Our wairua, our spirits, our tinana, our body, our hinengaro, the mind, our voice, reo, and our whānau, our community, our hapori, the social support networks around us, as well as, trusting our instincts. And so the course, it's not every day you need to break a kneecap, but knowing you can break a kneecap can give you the confidence that it takes to turn around and say that's not acceptable, or I won't, I'm not going to stick around and be treated like this, or whatever it might be that you need to say. So the goal is to also help unpack some of the layers of barriers that can come up when we are not being treated with the kindness and the respect that we deserve by someone close to us in our life, and sort of how we can navigate those goals and barriers in our personal relationships that come up, so that we can more quickly and with more confidence choose a response that is effective and also that feels appropriate for us in that situation. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think that we've just about covered this. The question is, how do we approach this in a way that empowers participants without placing responsibility on them?
I love this question. This is one of the main questions that drove me to enroll in a PhD program at Otago University, where I've been studying empowerment self-defense. And so in a lot of safety advice that women receive throughout their life tends to be like a long list of onerous...
Don't wear a short skirt.
Right.
I remember my dad once calling me some very, very nasty names associated with female sex workers for wearing a short skirt.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of that advice, sometimes it comes from a well-meaning place. We want to protect our girls and
absolutely, and I mean that's where it came from.
And that's why busting common myths and misperceptions is a really important part of empowerment self-defense too, around sexual violence and things like that. So we know from the research, from the evidence about things that situational factors that increase the risk of sexual violence taking place, things that tend to precede or risk factors that we can identify, and what a woman is wearing is not one of them. So just to bust that one straight, straight here and now.
It's one of the things that really irks me. If you go on mothers groups, there are so many women complaining about the how short the little shorts are in Kmart. And I'm like, if you're looking at a 5-year-old's bottom, her shorts are not the problem. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So, so in order to, that's a great example of a very clear kind of victim blaming discourse that's very alive and well in our society. But there are many more subtle forms that victim blame can take, and things that people can, we do inadvertently that can encourage self-blame, and which is a really common thing to feel. Like when somebody does experience an assault, whenever we have a bad experience, it's quite natural to look back and go, oh, what could I have done differently? What should I do differently next time? That's all very natural, but it's important that we keep our eye on the big picture when we're looking at this problem of gendered violence, because it's, even though it plays out at the level of individual bodies, it's not an individual problem. It's a cultural problem. And it's not our fault that we are at increased risk just by being born women. It's not our fault that we are at increased risk by being disabled. Nothing we do or don't do will ever make us responsible or to blame for experiencing violence. And so that's a core message that is reinforced throughout our programs. And so that's, even though there are things we can do to protect ourselves, to disrupt violence, it's not our responsibility to stop others from behaving poorly, right? Perpetrators are 100% responsible for their actions. And so that's why, my role as a facilitator of these programs isn't to come in and say, here's a big list of do's and don'ts. We get enough of those in the world. So I see my role more as creating a safe space for people to get in touch with what their own power and capacity they already have, and to add a few more evidence-based tips, tricks, and skills to give them more confidence in a greater range of options to choose what feels right for them. Yeah.
Perfect. That's a really strong message. So beyond physical techniques, I think this is quite important, because people with my level of physical ability are not breaking anybody's knee. It's not going to happen. It's not, just absolutely not realistic. So what does safety mean in your program beyond those physical techniques?
So there's always something that we can do to increase our chances of getting out of a situation or disrupting an attack. And so that can be using our voices. We tend to underestimate the power of the voice, whether that's a loud, forceful, angry yell, which studies have shown is just as effective as a punch or a kick in stopping a sexual assault. One form of forceful physical or verbal resistance increases our chances by 60%.
Oh, okay.
And that doesn't have to be a fancy ninja move. It's a display of any sort of display of forceful, aggressive, verbal, or physical resistance. And the more things we do, the higher our chances are of getting out of that situation. And part of the reason is that most attacks are by people we know. And those folks are, it often starts with little boundary incursions early on, testing boundaries, wearing us down, grooming, all that kind of stuff. So they don't think they're going to need a lot of physical force. And most attackers aren't really prepared to continue if they're met with determined resistance. So that it doesn't mean that we'll get out of every situation without a scratch.
And it also doesn't mean it's your fault if you don't yell and if you don't fight back.
Exactly.
You're still not to blame.
Absolutely. So the absence of a no does not necessarily mean that somebody has consented, right? So we look at all of that stuff. We unpack what are our rights in sexual situations and in other situations. So, for disabled folks who may have relationships with carers, that where they are dependent on people for a certain level of support and assistance, it's really important that folks have tools and some sort of, I guess, scripts, if you will, for how to approach asking for what they need and expressing what they need when what they want or need is different from what the other person thinks they want or need, for example. So that can be, not necessarily a situation of safety, but a situation of dignity and of freedom and of, it's a matter of standing up for yourself in those everyday ways. For example, somebody, grabbing your wheelchair and pushing you across the road and you don't want that help, perhaps. How can you explain that to them, or how can you say that to them in a way that still enables you to achieve your goals, which is perhaps to maintain a good relationship with that person because you do need their support in other ways. So we'll brainstorm in the class. Our conversations, Amy, have been really helpful in you giving me some ideas about realistic situations that folks might experience, and the women that come to the class will bring their experiences and ideas, and so to some extent I'll prepare scenarios, and to some extent we'll wing it in terms of what kinds of situations people would like to feel more confident in, and we can role play. I can offer some, based on the psychology of assertiveness and communication, some skills, and then people can have a chance to practice making it their own. So that's
that's wonderful. So one of the examples, so we recently were lucky enough to have an interview with the Star magazine, which is an auxiliary of the ODT, and one of the questions I was asked was to give some examples of these sort of carer situations. So the example that I gave was something that I experience regularly. So the support workers will come into your home with a preset idea of what they want to do. So they might go into the bathroom and clean the bathroom when it's already clean. But what I need them to do that day is to empty the dustbins, because the dustbins are overflowing, but the bathroom is clean. But it takes a certain amount of assertiveness to actually redirect people without seeming rude or overbearing or
or ungrateful. Right. And so I think feminine socialization in general, conditions women in particular to not want to make a fuss, to not want to seem ungrateful, to be accommodating, to consider other people's needs and feelings first. All of those things are really rewarded for people who are perceived as feminine or femme in our society. And then for folks who are disabled as well, there's another layer on top of that, right? The discrimination that people face and the the expectations of being grateful for any little bit of assistance you might get, where, we live in a culture where if we lived in a culture that was more inclusive, that support would be a given, not something you need to necessarily, be so grateful for that you can't ask for what you need. Yeah. So it's also, inviting conversation and reflection about our culture and ways that we can recognize, so not just fighting against, bad guys, quote unquote, but also fighting against bad ideas that make us feel less than or not worthy, or that can interfere with our ability to do the simple things that we're all capable of to keep ourselves safe.
Wonderful. So I think we've covered the other questions in this section. So in the interest of time, we're going to talk about barriers and access. What are some of the barriers that disabled women face when it comes to self-defense training?
Well, a lot of barriers that apply to all spaces could apply depending on the venue, if there's not accessibility to the space. But also, in not all teachers of, say, martial arts-based training have experience or training in how to adapt what they're teaching for different needs and abilities. So, but the reality is, in a course where it's open to all disabled women, there could be people with extremely diverse needs in the class.
Absolutely. And there will be.
And so to an extent, it's accepting that not everything you teach is going to work for everybody, and that's okay. you make sure, making sure you teach something that's going to work for each person along the way. And what I find is that in groups with a lot more diverse ability, structuring the lessons less around, okay, we're going to do this technique and then we're going to do this technique. It's better to do, here's a scenario, and you being you with your abilities, how could you respond, or what could you use that would work for you in that scenario? And so that's how I approach it. Teaching a range of different things, and people can pick up the things that will work for them, and then practice putting it in different scenarios and brainstorming. Like I say, there's always something you can do. So we focus on what you can do and not on what you can't. In terms of teaching, making things accessible by speaking slowly and clearly, by if there's folks who, members of the deaf community, having interpreters on the ready, and making sure that when I'm demonstrating, I'm also explaining clearly with my words what I'm doing, so not just relying on the visual for folks who may be low vision. And things like that, so that we can find a way to communicate that works for each person there.
Wonderful. And I really like the idea of giving a range of strategies and letting people pick what works for them, because I think that that's a really disability-led approach, and it's a very empowering approach. It's not, I'm telling you what to do. It's a respect that you know your limitations and you know your abilities, and you pick what works for you. I like that. I really do.
And oftentimes, things like disability aids can be used in self-defense. I had a woman did one of my courses, and she was later at the supermarket when, I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, there was a stabbing event at the countdown.
Yes, I do.
And she was there, and she was an older woman, and she was on crutches. And amidst the fray of people who were trying to intervene, she got in there, and she remembered some of the things she'd learned in self-defense about breathing to calm her body. And she used her voice, and she used her crutch, and she whacked him in the knee with her crutch.
Good on her.
Yeah. And it was in that moment that he was able to be disarmed by someone else who was there as well. So, she didn't take credit for the whole disarming, but that she contributed in that moment, and she felt that blow was enough to loosen his grip or to distract him. And then oftentimes that's what it takes. It's just something that we can do to flip the script that can give us a moment to take advantage of. Right. So, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. That's such a feel-good story as well. It's really actually so empowering. So just in the interest of time, we're going to close up by saying we are having this course at the weekend. So today's Friday, so we're going to be running it tomorrow on Saturday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And then the second session, so you need to attend both, runs on Sunday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. There are still spaces available for this course, so if you want to register the last minute, you can email me. My email address is kaituitui.otipoti. And there's 2 O's in Otipoti because we can't put a macron on an O in an email address, at dpa.org.nz. So get in touch, or you can contact me on Facebook. My tag is Amy Taylor, Disability Advocate. And get in touch and register for this fabulous free workshop that has been run by DPA and Kia Hauramu.
Kia Hauramu.
Hauramu. Yeah. I really need to get that right. Kia Hauramu.
Yeah, Hauramu means safety.
Oh, wonderful. I learn something new every day. Thank you very much for your time, Bill.
Thank you
it's
for
been
having
fantastic.
Me. Yeah, thank you. And it's wonderful to work with you and the Disabled Persons Assembly. So I'm really looking forward to the weekend and to meeting the amazing women that will be there.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun as well. We're going to have a wonderful time. So
I always
thank you.
Learn so much in every class too.
Disabled Persons Assembly is Aotearoa, New Zealand's first pan-disability national organisation, providing system-level advocacy for all disabled people, membership is free for individuals. If you'd like to know more, visit our national website at www.dpa.org.nz or contact your local kaituitui or community connector, Amy Taylor, at kaituitui.otipoti@dpa.org.nz. Disabled Persons Assembly, a whole new attitude.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.